Can an animated film about emotions really be that good? Let's diagnose it to find out. Welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Inside Out. Is it good, bad, or somewhere right in the middle? Make sure to leave your comments down below. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you're not already to join the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. But going right into synopsis. As Riley moves cross country with her parents and takes on a whole lot of changes, her emotions must work overtime to accommodate all the new things that are going on in her life. And going right into positive, overall this is a complex film with a simple structure, making it easy for anyone to follow for all ages. And as Pixar films often go, it is really great by the direction it is having to behold. Peter Sohn is great as the director, and the animation is good for the 3D aspects that you can bring out of it. There's nothing that particularly stands out fantastically, but it is still beautiful for the nature of what it has to pull off, and for the story that it has as its base. It just pulls off these emotions, having characters as the main focus of what you're building, the inside, the character minds that you're building on the layer that's living out on Earth. And so it's just showing an explanation, sort of how our mind works in a simplified sort of fashion that still works effectively because it can work for those that know the inner workings of psychology and those that aren't so familiar, aren't looking to study into it, because it still can be just that fun kids film or fun film in general that can work for anyone and builds upon the structure of Riley's mindset as someone in her preteens and how that works in her mind, how she is learning to grow up, facing the struggles of moving. That is something that works effectively because we all went through something along those lines, or even before that. You can still build upon the complex structure of understanding how to relate with Riley, what is she going through, and everything is done by a show and not so much a tell, by just how you're working through the emotions that's building on these characters, and then showing the insights into the real world as well as the inner workings of her mind, going off of so many colorful puns that just work effectively with the nature because they're oftentimes more subtle than how it does, because it plays off of certain aspects of her brain, of terms we use for like train of thought, and these different structures of personality that makes up Riley as a person. While there is certain inner workings, it can still be so simplified to the nature that's easy to follow, that builds upon these characters within Riley's mind, and also bounces off upon those to show some subtle differences for how the characters can work within other people's mind, but focusing in on Riley and how her mind works and the situation she's set in simplifies everything, that makes it easier to settle in, focusing on one character while also balancing out the 5 characters in her mind, as well as all these side characters that are going about imaginary characters, different subplots, and just how that inner works within her mind, within the story that's balancing out, within the moves she is facing. The struggles you get with that is something that, even though I haven't moved, is something I can sympathize with because of the basis of what it sets out Riley to be, the characters that they are building out, the emotions, and the inner workings of those characters, the emotional characters, that is building on a complex theme of what happiness means or what sadness means, and what each of the emotions, how they collide together to make a human work more complexly, and still simplify the simple nature of the themes to be understandable and relatable to most everyone that has gone through any sort of tough situation or the happier situation, that makes you go through the understanding of what the message of this story is really going out to be. And as someone that is a fan of psychology, while I didn't major in college, it is still something something I have studied off on my own and in different classes throughout college that makes it that much more compelling as a film, as something that I can really look into and dissect. And each time I watch this film, there's something new that I can really pick out of that makes it more surreal, especially as I learn more from psychology. I understand that much more why this works in all of its little nuances, all of the problems that Riley is going through. And while you're not getting a one-side outside world of what's going through, all of the emotions that they are building as characters are the thoughts that Riley is going through, and that is what is making her mind so messed up and confused by how she has to settle because of all the anxiety she is facing as a person that is going through this move and trying to work out all of her friendships and all of the different changes that she is going on in her life, making it seem that much more real as the situation and as the rewatches have gone along for my experience. And that goes in some of the mixed elements, to which some of the nuances of the film are intermixed within the simplicity of the nature of the film that is effective, obviously, for everything that it goes about, making it a narrow focus, being able to stabilize everything that it's holding onto its grasp. But when you look at it for its in-universe timeline that it's going about, unless it's showing something that's skipping over, something that makes it hard to follow the timeline, it's going over like only a couple days after Riley moves out, and she does certain things that we're not going to spoil on this review, but what ends up happening, how it falls through so quickly, just feels way too rushed for the timeline that sets up Riley as a character and how she settles into this new house, this new school, and how all that goes about is just really quick. And yes, it can play into what makes sense or what it's skipping over that makes it hard to follow the timeline, but that could be another problem on its own that doesn't necessarily wreck the film as a whole, but ultimately still feels like there's something missing with the inner workings of the puzzle, putting all the pieces together and having a concept of the time that is progressing and looking at the real life incident that this could pull off based on how everything is pulling off. And while there's incidents within her mind of when emotions go missing, there's something to be said that is supposed to be an interplaying workings to when those emotions go missing within just the complex thought in general, that specific problem wouldn't be going on in real life when you're going about the certain emotions that are going through, but it is just an answer that this film is utilizing in a genius way to show how they are absent from the emotional board. And so, yes, I am dissecting it really precisely, but that's just how my brain works to be able to understand what it's going through. That doesn't really ruin the film, and it could be in the same boat of whether you end up liking this along the same way or not. It's not action-filled, that's really clever in all of its nuances and smartness, but it still has a unique sense of style that still builds upon its own narrative in a genius way that still bounces back and forth as a whole. But that leads into the negatives. Overall, there's something about this film upon each watch where its simplicity, while it has a good sense of being able to be focused in on Riley and these 5 characters and the emotions, there's something about the lack of extra emotions that makes more sense for what Riley is going through. It can't necessarily be dumbed down to 5 different emotions, even though it makes it somewhat easier to follow, and maybe that's exactly the choices they made to make it easy to comprehend, especially for younger kids, being able to just enjoy this or even understand the themes without having to dissect it too deeply. As a psychology fan myself, it always feels like there's something missing out of the absence of all of these extra little characters where you're even getting the mention of anxiety when she doesn't show up until Inside Out 2, which makes sense for that period of her life where we are leading into, having not seen it yet myself just yet, but what that all entails with certain ideas and just certain emotions that do show up before she becomes a teenager and are absent from this film, just feels like there's something that is hard to comprehend and grasp as what's missing, that doesn't definitely ruin the film as a whole, because I still see the ingenious plotline of what it is following through with and becoming more real and real as it goes along. But also, when I rewatch this film more and more, it still becomes more evident that that is the missing piece that makes this film that much more complex as a whole, where there should be more emotional guidance between joy not being the only positive emotion, and while if happy was an emotion they used as a character, they obviously would have to remove happiness from the equation of what's working on the motherboard in order for Riley to be in the same character arc that she goes on as a being that houses those emotions. The absence of extra emotions that people go on that dumbs it down to only 5 different emotions in this film just kind of takes things out of proportion for what I personally grasp for the psychology side of things as a whole. And so that's just my personal review of Inside Out. And while there are some nuances that cause problems along the way, I have to rate it a simply 8.5 out of 10, where I just think it's ingenious for the picture that is capturing as a whole. So that's just my personal thoughts of Inside Out. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this film as a whole. Do you like it, not like it, or somewhere right in the middle where it just doesn't fit your fancy? And that's just all. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy, subscribe when you're ready to join the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all. Make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.